My bad, sorry. KFI, AM640, more stimulating talk. It is a Dark Secret place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight, and we'll get around to Russian military exercises in along the border of NATO, which is what we used to call Eastern Europe, and a little more on Venezuela. And what if the world's two largest nations, China and India, went to war again? Of course, you all know that China and India went to war in the early 60s, so we'll get to that here in a little bit. I am live on the YouTube. If you go to unsheepyourself.com, unsheep yourself, like you're a sheep and you don't want to be a sheep anymore, so you would unsheep yourself. And we'll see how the Wi-Fi holds up this week. Last week, the things were not so hot, but it's not like we're a media technology company or something. I mean, oh, yeah. So investigators from the Government Accountability Office, which, believe it or not, oversees all federal spending. The GAO actually has a mandate to inspect when money is squandered in the U.S. military. Because, of course, you can't rely on the Pentagon's auditors, now can you? Because they're pigs at the same trough. So the GAO apparently has been warning the U.S. Navy in regards to long-term effects of cutting training in navigation and just simple seamanship. Congressional investigators and military officials warned repeatedly about overworked sailors, shortened training schedules, and budget cuts in the... Pardon me, I have a coughing fit that I have to take care of. All right, all done. Where were we? Budget cuts in the years leading up to two fatal collisions involving U.S. Navy ships. This is what government auditors, lawmakers, and Pentagon officials said. The collisions in June and then last week, both Navy guided missile destroyers operating in the Pacific left 17 sailors dead or missing. So in other words, the 7th Fleet was deadlier than Afghanistan. More U.S. service personnel died in the Fitzgerald and McCain collisions than have died in Afghanistan. 3 reports in the past 2 years by the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, an independent watchdog agency, spelled out endemic problems in the U.S. Navy. They found through interviews as well as internal studies in the Navy that U.S. sailors, American sailors overseas, often arrive to their assigned ships without adequate skills and experience. They end up on duty for an average of, I give the Navy a lot of crap. You know I do. And the Navy gives me a lot of crap. But I'll tell you what, I don't know how many hours you work per week, but listen to this. The average sailor, regardless of rating, regardless of what their job is, deployed on an actual combat vessel, the average work week is 108 hours a week. The Navy standard, by the way, if you're saying that's crazy, what's the Navy standard? Is it 40? No, the Navy standard is 80 hours a week. So in other words, the Navy's normal is twice what you work. If you work 40 hours a week, you know what? You're half a sailor. Okay, so whatever age they are. And then, oh, by the way, the officers work even more. And so the standard, the Navy's standard is your sailors should be working 80 hours a week. So that means... obviously Saturday's a work day, and Sunday's a work day. And even with those 2 days, you're still talking about 14-hour days, 13, 14-hour days to make it to 80 hours, never mind 108 hours. And so obviously, and then, oh, by the way, there's another factor, is that there's no set schedules. There are a lot of sailors who are doing, 16 on, 8 off, and then 16 on, or 16 on, 16 off, and flipping. And that absolutely plays hell with someone's circadian rhythm. You can ask any sleep specialist. Firemen don't do that, but some police departments do that. My wife used to work at a police department where she would do 2 12s, right? she would do 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., or she would do midnight to noon, and then go home, and then midnight to noon. She would do that, and then take 24 hours off and flip and do noon to midnight and noon to midnight. And that would be 1 week. That would be 1 work week. That there was a full circadian flip every week. And by the end of her 4th shift, by the end of that 4th day, when she was ending 12 hours, I got to tell you, I wouldn't trust myself with a gun. I mean, because you mess with a circadian rhythm like that, and you get lapses in judgment. And sleep specialists and doctors will tell you that sleep deprivation, if you go 24 hours without sleep, if you go 18 hours without sleep, it's the equivalent of having like 5 shots of alcohol. And so the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, found this several years ago. Experienced sailors routinely provide on-the-job training for less experienced sailors, so the time doing this must come out of sleep time, personal time, or other allotted work time. This is a May 2017 GAO report. So the some of the initial chatter on Twitter, people were speculating, well, the Chinese have found a way to hack American ships, or why don't they turn on their GPS and all that? The 2 collisions, the Fitzgerald off the west coast of Japan and then the McCain off of Singapore, those are 2 of the most dense waterways in the world. Of course they have their GPS on. The more important thing is there is not an automated system that is better than human eyeballs. And it's the human eyeballs that should have seen the collisions coming, regardless of weather or darkness conditions. So the U.S. Navy has their smoking gun on this one, and there's not a quick fix. And so that's not good news. The bottom line, 2 Aegis-class guided missile cruisers that were part of a ballistic missile defense against North Korea are in the dry dock. They are not in the 7th Fleet driving around the Western Pacific. All right, back in just a minute. It is Dark Secret Place. Brian sits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Oh. What did I say? It's pretty good. As you're seeing, my transition from iPhone to Android right here, it's a better camera. It's did I? Okay. Well, guided missile destroyers. God damn, Jesus. I think it's a better camera, frankly. I don't know what that's for. What's that? Yeah, it's a way better camera. As I pan around here. Yeah, I got a new haircut. I went to my favorite barbershop, BB's, in Palmdale, which apparently I'm the only white person who goes there. Excuse me. Yeah, BB's in Palmdale. And the lady wanted to actually do one of those, things where they shave the part in. And I said, well, no, I have a comb. I can actually use a comb. And she said, you don't want to mark it? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not in a Mexican gang. Sorry.
Channel 9 just showed a highlight or two. It looked pretty bad for McGregor.
Yeah, there at the end, he got pounded. Michael Chappé's talking to me. We're hanging out. We're bros.
He looked like a punching machine.
Yeah. See, I can shower now. Yeah, I went to Gary Hoffman's house. We had a KFI party at Gary Hoffman's house. We had Michelle Cube was there. I think Shannon went up there after the Chargers game. But we had Dean Sharp, the House Whisperer, who I've never met. Michelle, and then Mo Kelly showed up with his wife. So Mo was there. So, and then I was there, the disabled veteran. So it was all the diversity hires were up there. So that is the Como Gary Hoffman. Gary and I have the great honor that we were both fired by the same asshole at Como. This guy at Como, the program director at Como, told Gary that he would never be an anchor. Gary was a reporter for Como, and he said that he would never be an anchor. And all right, you there? All right. So anyway, yeah. So this asshole, our program director up at Como, said to Gary, "Well, you'll never be an anchor," and all this, and Gary said, "Well, okay, fuck you," and next job Gary had was as the morning anchor on KFI here in Los Angeles, which is kind of a big deal. And then the same guy, you know what? I might say fuck it and give up on this. You know, the fact that we don't have a dedicated Wi-Fi, you know, just for streams and stuff like that is a little stupid, because we're KFI and we're in Los Angeles where we have the internet.
Is the computer ready?
Yeah. So I might just end this stream. This is fucking stupid. That it keeps biting up like this. It's really dumb. I mean, I'll keep it up as long as it'll stay up, but this is pissing me off.
It's part of our biggest sale of the year, where all beds are on sale. Plus, save an incredible 50% on the Labor Day limited edition bed with free home delivery and Saturday. For more details and to find one of our 29 stores in the greater area,
Hey, this is Steven Tyler and Joe Perry from Aerosmith. Hi, this is Paul Rogers on iHeartRadio. Just that easy. Open up the free.
It is your fault, Danielle. It's your fault that I don't have a good solid stream.
At this point, I use the iHeartRadio app every day.
You know what I'm saying?
Stations all free.
download our free iHeartRadio app or listen online at iHeartRadio.com.
Coming up on Sunday morning with Elizabeth.
I don't think I can.
Yeah, we survived the eclipse. Now this.
I can't downgrade.
We're gonna have an expert.
I can't downgrade the stream.
Probably LA's darkest timeline to date.
Sunday morning with Elizabeth Espinosa. Tomorrow morning at 5 on KFI AM 640.
More stimulating talk.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here for one more hour, next hour. And here live until midnight. Remember, at the tail end of the Obama administration, the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM, this tiny little obscure agency that is the storing house, the clearinghouse, as it were, of, for instance, all of the classified individual government documents for getting a clearance called the SF-86. There's a form, and you can go online and you can Google SF-86, and it's a personal security questionnaire, a PSQ. And everyone in the military who needed a clearance, all officers and enlisted people who needed a clearance, anyone in the FBI, the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, of millions of people of all the security, the 19 intelligence agencies, and then the 5 that you don't know about because we don't officially say they exist, they had to fill out SF-86s. And you absolutely bare your soul in the SF-86. And you go back 7 years in your address history, or 10 years in your rental history, your education. You name names of teachers and references and things like that. Your credit history, your criminal history, if you have one, all this stuff. And the unspoken contract with the government is, I'm going to fill this out to the absolute best of my ability, and I'm going to be completely honest because you told me to be honest. But this is secure information. It's mine and mine alone. And I am giving you permission to look into my bank accounts, because I wrote them down here, the ABA numbers and all that. Look into my car financing, the whole thing. But just don't lose the information. Or I'm sorry, not lose it, but don't let anyone else see it. Well, so the OPM was hacked. It was hacked round about 2012. And how did we find this out? Well, a firm that was hired to actually help them with security discovered that they had been hacked. And so everybody whose job it is to protect you and the entire country, everyone in the military, the FBI, etc., our SF-86s had been hacked. Most likely by China. Why do we know that? Well, there was an arrest here in LA a few days ago, and we'll talk about that. But this was a absolutely enraging event for those of us who had filled out and filed SF-86s. That you couldn't put them in some kind of firewalled computer. I mean, literally, if you want to store them electronically, that's fine. But put them on a computer in the corner with a 2 terabyte drive or something like that. I remember when I filled my first one out, it's an online program called the EPSQ, the Electronic Personal Security Questionnaire, Personal Security Questionnaire. And you sit there and you finish each page and you go save, save, save. And then if you want, you print out an interim copy and maybe take it home and you make little corrections. Then you go back the next day and you fill out your corrections. And then at the very end of it, you save it and submit it. And that's the thing where you can practically hear the chiming bells of doom. You send that thing off and you say, did I get absolutely everything correct? You literally can't have a gap in your housing chronology. Like this one time, I left Salt Lake City and moved to Portland. I left a station in Salt Lake City to go do a morning show in Portland. And I took 3 days to drive out there with my dogs because I wanted to just decompress. Well, I wrote that down. And the program kicked it back and said 3 days. 3 days missing. And I went, okay, how about this? Isuzu Trooper 2, a 1999 Isuzu Trooper 2. That's where I was living. I was living on the banks of the Snake River for one day, then the banks of the Columbia River the next day, and then the Pacific Ocean on the third day. And no, that doesn't work. So you have to put this work into it. Well, that stuff was compromised. And so for those of us who put the sweat and the elbow grease into filling those things out, the idea that it was so cavalierly stored absolutely pissed us off. Well, a arrest here in the LA area may lead to some more understanding. And hey, do you like the computer games and Risk and the rest of it? Can you imagine if China and India ever went to war? Well, they did in the past. And many, many in India think they're about to here. Right when the world is looking over there, and then looking over at McGregor Mayweather, and then looking over there, that's when things like this happen. India versus China, will it kick off this weekend over territory? We'll talk about it right after this. The Dark Secret Place, Brian sits in here until midnight, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk.
This season on KFI.
All right, I got to run to the break room. If you know what I'm saying.
Do we keep letting them put leeches on people?
KFI.
And KOSTHD2.
Los Angeles, Orange County.
24-hour news.
More stimulating talk.
Apparently deadly flooding. I'm Michael Chapin, live from the 24-hour KFI newsroom. Tropical storm Harvey downgraded from a Category 4 hurricane has apparently claimed the life of a second person. A medical examiner in Houston says one person's been killed tonight in heavy flooding in Harris County. The woman that died had apparently gotten out of her car in high water. Cause of death, though, has not yet been confirmed. Another person was killed in a fire blamed on the storm as it slammed the Texas coast last night. At least 500,000 people are without power. The National Hurricane Center says it expects the storm to weaken to a tropical depression tomorrow. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has visited a storm shelter in Austin. He says the people there left everything behind, and some of them will have nothing to go back to.
They need this time and this place and this food right here. It's our job to make sure that they're going to be taken care of. We will take care of our fellow Texans.
He says that they'll take care of everyone as a team. We also help hand out food at that shelter. The news brought to you by Mike Diamond, the Smell Good plumber. LA marked its 236th birthday this morning with the annual Celebrate Our Heritage Walk. Participants walked the same 9-mile route the city's founding families took in 1781. It stretched from the San Gabriel Mission to Olvera Street with a celebration ceremony held at the historic monument. The city will officially celebrate its 236th birthday on September 4th. A bill to tax the tap has been working its way through the legislature in Sacramento. Cindy Tuck with the Association of California Water Agencies says her group is against the tax because it opens the door to more taxes on water.
One concern that we've had is that the public isn't really aware that this is being talked about at the legislature, that it's, that they don't know that a tax on drinking water is being considered.
Environmental and agricultural groups are supporting the measure. The Senate bill would add a 95-cent tax per month to water bills. The money would be used to clean contaminated groundwater and provide clean, safe drinking water to all parts of the state. The Dodgers have hit a home run supporting cancer research.
For the 9th year in a row, the Dodgers have teamed up with City of Hope for Think Cure Weekend at Dodger Stadium. Throughout the weekend, they'll be recognizing courageous cancer patients and survivors and paying tribute to the hardworking healthcare professionals and researchers who support them. Cancer survivors and their physicians will take the field each day. Think Cure has raised more than $2 million to help support research grants. Donations can be made by visiting City of Hope's Think Cure website. Their slogan, when we think cure together, we progress, we heal, and we inspire. Julie Slater, KFI News.
Connecticut Democratic Congressman Jim Hines says President Trump paints a dark picture of the future. Hines says when factories close, pride and community turn to fear and division, and he says Trump exploits that fear by blaming immigrants, Muslims, Democrats, and the media.
He promises walls and promotes division, and he delivers nothing. Not jobs, not opportunity, not unity.
He says Trump is the tweeter-in-chief and says the Democratic Party's Better Deal initiative is a better alternative to Trump's agenda. Traffic from your helpful SoCal Honda Traffic Center. Slow through Hollywood on the 101.
My dad never worked for Gettle. He was a self-employed air conditioning repairman named Duncan Goodrich.
All right, I guess we're back, huh?
People admired Orville and
Is the computer ready?
which were from Dayton, Ohio. The Gettle brothers
Um,
lived in the desert, not far from here. The Wright brothers were awarded 7 patents for their aircraft innovations. The Gettle brothers were awarded 114. Hundreds of millions of people owe their summertime comfort to
Yep, I'm good.
believed in Gettle. He told me never to buy anything else. So I saved up my money and I bought the company.
Yes, I will take bumper requests. No, not China Girl. I hate China Girl.
That flashlight was important to me. So when we arrive at your home, we're going to give you a Gettle flashlight because it's important to me too. When your system needs attention, no matter what brand it is, call Gettle. No one knows air conditioners like Gettle. No one. GOETTL. It'll keep you cool, but it's hard to spell. Gettle air conditioning.
You know what? I never played Hold My Flashlight with my dad.
SoCal weather from KFI.
Isn't that weird?
Low clouds and fog come in tonight. Low 60s to the mid 70s in spots. And then tomorrow it's going to be very hot. We're looking for beach highs after the burn off, getting up to near 80 degrees. Upper 80s to low 90s for the metro areas. Valley highs in the upper 90s to 106. 105 to 110 tomorrow for the Inland Empire, and slightly hotter by a couple of degrees Monday and Tuesday. In fact, it'll be hot with temperatures
Yeah, I'll play Killing an Arab. I'll always play that. It's a great song. See that I'm watching ESPN back there.
Dark secret place.
This radioactivity is covered.
Brian Suits on KFI.
Nearby, a complete radio transmitter will actually broadcast from tape before the shot.
It's a LG G6, yeah.
Dark secret place.
Ooh.
On KFI.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is a dark secret place. Brian Suits in here for one more hour talking about the world melting down, and it's especially acute these days. And right when you think you know where to look for the melting down of the world, it starts melting somewhere else. In this case, the border region between India and Pakistan. And we'll get to that here in just a second. I'm live streaming this on the YouTube. If you go to unsheepyourself.com, unsheepyourself, stream is really strong. It's a really good, strong stream. I'm very happy about that. But I keep having to restart it. So if I have to do it one more time, we're just going to call it a night. There is a picture. There's one of the still pictures coming out of the McGregor-Mayweather fight. I keep seeing it. Was towards the end in the 10th round when Mayweather just had a flurry of punches to the head, to the noggin of the unintelligible leprechaun. And he literally, in this picture, Mayweather, his glove has just come off Conor McGregor's face, and there's a giant booger flying out of his nose. I mean, it's a total snot rocket, and it's not a loogie. It's not coming out of his mouth. His mouth is open because he's got the mouth guard in there. But there is a booger. There's a giant wet booger coming out of Conor McGregor's nose. I mean, he literally punched the snot out of him. And I'll find the picture on the Twitter and send it out. Right when you think that the collisions of the U.S. Navy and Iran and the U.S. in near daily skirmishes in Syria and the Russian army holding soup to nuts, total top to bottom exercises right on the edge of NATO. Meanwhile, there's the short little guy in North Korea with nuclear weapons. Right when you're thinking that is the next large worldwide conflagration, all of a sudden China-India comes along. In 1962, the world's two most populous countries went to war against one another in a pair of remote mountainous border regions. In less than a month, China dealt India a devastating defeat, driving Indian forces back on all fronts. Along with breaking hopes of political solidarity in the developing world, the war helped structure the politics of East and Southeast Asia for generations. Even today, as Indian and Chinese forces square off on the Doklam Plateau, the legacy of 1962 resonates in both countries. Both the Chinese and Indian governments were relatively new. The People's Republic was declared in 1949, 2 years after India won their independence from Great Britain. The armed forces that would fight the war could not have been more different. The Indian Army developed firmly in light of India's imperial heritage. You could inject the Indian Army into the British Army, or you could inject the British Army into the Indian Army, and not skip a beat. The Chinese experience could not have been more different, however. The People's Liberation Army emerged as the military arm of the Chinese Communist Party, a revolutionary organization with both urban and rural roots. The PLA experienced 20 years of uninterrupted major combat operations after its creation, fighting bitter conflicts against the nationalist armies, which became Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek, and then the Imperial Japanese. The war in 1962, couldn't, in other words, be between two more vastly different types of armies. What's going on right now on the Doklam Plateau, on the very, very high Chinese-Indian border? I mean, we're talking about 8,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 15,000 feet. The Chinese and the Indians are in a very physical conflict on their border region. The Indians have heavy equipment up there to improve their defensive positions, and the Chinese are pushing back. I mean, literally physically pushing back. Last week, and I'll tweet out some footage that came out on Tuesday. But last week, the Chinese and Indian armies got into a rock fight. I mean, they literally are on the border of China and India. And what both sides are doing is they're sending forward units of soldiers unarmed because they know what's happening on the border. They're getting into fist fights. And so in this one particular fist fight, the Indians and the Chinese last week are fighting. They're actually kicking and fighting, biting, punching, the whole thing. And then they start picking up rocks. They're way up in the mountains. And this fight is taking place on the edge of a frozen lake. And it's being videoed from above, from rocks up above. And the Chinese start picking up rocks and throwing them. The Indians are picking up rocks and throwing them. And there's like a little high area between the lake and the rocks. And an Indian soldier is up there throwing rocks down at the Chinese, right? And he's up there just throwing these big rocks. And then out of nowhere, a Chinese soldier does a flying kick and nails this guy in the back and launches him off this cliff into and it's not sand or dirt, it's like broken rock. And it looks like a kung fu movie. And it's not the year 1200 BC. It's 2017. It's last week. And it's two nuclear powers. It's China and India. And they're on the verge of going to war again. And this is probably the developing conflict with the least amount of eyeballs on it. Because this has never gone away. This conflict between China and India really, truly has never gone away. The China-Pakistan conflict.